Whew, it is remarkably an entirely new decade. Can you believe that? Even though I still wonder, like when does it count, right? So the millennium didn't start until 2001, not 2000, which everybody thought, that's how it was supposed to go. Yeah, frankly, they were just like selling all these videotapes about how to survive Y2K, which, anyway, like that happened. I kind of wish it would, or wish it did. But regardless, yeah, so does the decade really start on 2021? When does this all happen? Yeah, great question. Anyway, doesn't really matter. Let's just say it is the new decade. Are you getting a new sovereign tech? Well, there's things. This is a conversation for another time. But speaking of something new that I am asking the help of the sovereign tech Zomia ONE audience. I imagine I've got some killer web developers in my audience, and something I just don't exactly have the time to make happen. I really want to have a site, that way a forum site, so we can get away from social media. Now, you can say, yeah, setting up a forum site with WordPress, Rock BB Press and everything, all that is very basic stuff. It is. But to do it right and to have, frankly, the right colorations and all this stuff, what's the plugin you use, like BB Style or whatever, takes a lot of time. If anyone out there, because I've had offers in the past and I usually don't take it, but if anyone wants to give me an assist with building, and it's not complex, I like my websites looking like they're out of the 1990s, to say nothing of 2020. Someone wants to give an assist with building out the website. And again, the main purpose of it is a forum website. There's going to be some other stuff done in the background, but a lot of that, I could handle later on. But that is the main gist. Tell you what, you get in touch with me, bbs@sovereigntech.com. You know the email address, or you can direct message me on Twitter, and I would love to work with you on it. So anyway, putting that out there, I think that's something that needs to be. The internet, unfortunately, isn't going anywhere right now. So I guess we should, I think having a more full-on website, even outside of what Podbean offers, would be a great thing. And I think setting up something that has a more palatable social aspect, that being forums, which have been around forever, I think would be a very good thing. So anyway, if you want to help out with that, you just shoot me an email. And, don't shoot me, just shoot me an email. Even though I'm sure there's plenty of people who'd love to do that. But yeah, we'll make that happen. I really got a lot of exciting stuff set up for 2020, and I am rearranging my schedule quite a bit to make time for those things. Because 2019, well, that was a hell of a year. Certainly ended off the decade with things I did not expect, but in the end, all pleasantries, baby. And something that was a pleasantry, something that was a surprise. I am not going to review it here. I am going to review it in an episode of Sovereign Tech. But Ellen and I actually last night for the New Year's Eve, I guess you could say festivities, among other things we did, we watched a movie. And the movie, it's something, I ordered the Blu-ray a little while back. I read a review of it. The movie's Swedish. But nice thing about, in fact, this plays nicely into a question that I got, a very quick direct message on Twitter that I got actually, which we'll get to later. But I read this review for this movie, and it's been a long time since I saw like a really original, good, hard science fiction movie. Okay. I mean, it's been a while. The last one that I can really think of was like Europa Report, which I did a review of that on Sovereign Tech back when that came out. And boy, that was, when was that? 2013? I don't know, something like that. That was a long, long time ago. But and even that I think is technically a foreign film. I don't think that was made in America. It's been a while since I've seen like a really great, again, hard science fiction film, and a film where it's using science fiction as allegory, to make a point, instead of it just being pew, pew, and explosions everywhere and whatever the fuck else. Yeah. I know we call that space opera. Oh boy. Anyway, the things I could say about that. Whatever. Okay. This movie, or Aniara is the name of it. Aniara. Aniara. Came out in 2018, so it came out last year. Nice thing about Blu-rays, because I did pick out the Blu-rays, is that it does have the English dub on it, and it also has the multiple subtitle selection. One of those subtitles being where it only translates into English words on the screen that, you can't really grasp, perhaps, readily, that are in a different language. And man, I mean, there's so much to say around Blu-rays with this, but it was we watched it, and I'm just going to, for right now, I am going to review it on Sovereign Tech, but right now, I am going to recommend this movie to you. In fact, you can safely watch the trailer if you want to look up the trailer for it. If I think of it, I'll put it in the show notes. It's actually a very well done trailer, quite engaging, because this is a movie. There's a couple things I'm going to tell you before you watch it, and then later come Monday. And remember, Sovereign Tech Prime episodes, or proper episodes, they come out on Mondays now. We moved the date for 2020 to where they come out on Mondays for clarity. But if you want to watch the movie ahead of time and then hear my review, because it's going to be spoiler filled, there's a couple things I want to share with you. Okay. Now I will say that Ellen and I, when we went into watching it, we went sight unseen. I had read a review, and the review of it, while it kind of gave things away, definitely sold this movie to me. Like, okay, yeah, I want to see this. But I'll admit, you're better off not watching the review, because then you don't have certain expectations, because I had some expectations with this. And again, we went into this sight unseen more or less, didn't even watch the trailer, and we had the trailers on the Blu-ray. I wish there was a commentary track on the Blu-ray. You don't have to get the Blu-ray if you don't want to, but understand that this movie, you probably want to watch it either with subtitles. I will tell you that the voices of the dubbed voices in English don't exactly match the look of the actors and actresses involved, but they work well enough. It's very serviceable. I mean, I've seen times where like the dubs are fucking horrible and take you right out of the film. That was not the case with this. But if you listen to it with the Swedish, with the original actors' voices, I mean, their voices definitely match more what they look like in real life. I mean, that just makes sense, but anyway, just something to keep in mind. But if you're going to pirate this thing, this is one of the issues with pirating, is that you don't always get the subtitles, or you might not get the dub if you want to do the dub. I mean, this is the beauty of Blu-rays. We're going to get that, again, that's going to play into a question later on. We have a very entertainment question filled show this time around. So if that ain't your bag, then I guess you can skip this one for now. But we got a great album of the week as well to get into. But finishing up with Aniara. The movie, I won't tell you everything that I was expecting, but this isn't really a spoiler, but I'll say this. I would have enjoyed, I watched the movie with a lot of tension. Okay. I don't really want to give anything away exactly here, but I just want you to know that nobody, like at no point in the movie, I felt like I was constantly waiting for this while I was watching this film. Okay. I was expecting like somebody to just go on a murder spree. I mean, all right, I can tell you what happens from the get-go, right? And I mean, I kind of knew this part, is that it's a ship in the not so far off future. Okay. And when you watch the trailer, you get this. When you're not so in the far off future, they are, the Earth's wrecked, whatever, and humans take 3-week trips to resettle on Mars, basically. And one of the ships that they're on, which are basically these flying malls, ends up off course. I won't say any more than that, but it ends up off course, and it's these people aboard the ship having to deal with the fact that they're not going to Mars, and they don't know, what their fate is, basically. Okay, so there's the gist. I'm just going to say, I mean, it is a very weird film in a great way, but the whole time I am watching this movie, I am just like waiting for like, a murder spree or something to happen, or something really gruesome to go down. That does not happen. I don't want you to go into this film with that kind of tension, because I think there's a lot to appreciate and enjoy knowing that that's not really going to happen. So I don't really think that's a spoiler because it's really telling you what's not going to happen. Maybe that's technically a spoiler, but you know how I feel about spoilers. I don't really give a shit because I think people that are concerned about spoilers, I think you're terrorists, right? Like you're holding everybody's tongue hostage and yeah, I think that's horseshit, but anyway, check this movie out. I guarantee you haven't seen a movie like this in a long time. This is science fiction done right. Might be a little heavy-handed. You might feel the same way, but it's science fiction done right, and I look forward to sharing my review with you come next episode of Sovereign Tech. But again, I will say I really like the movie. I mean, I'm not going to give you my ranking, but I really, really like the movie. So you're not going in to watch a dud. I had some people. I had some people email me who went and watched Double Dragon, and they're like, what the fuck did you get me to watch? I didn't tell you to watch it, and I told you it wasn't a good movie. But whatever. Anyway, you've got that under your belt now. You are one of the rare people that knows about the movie that is Double Dragon. So I'm have a good time with that. And even though it sounds like you didn't. But regardless, let's get into, shall we? Let's get into our questions. Like I said, we do have a couple they're entertainment questions. We're going to get into those. Something I will tell you quick. Just the other day, I had I've had a kind of quasi days off here, just because of the holidays, and I reinstalled, just for shits and giggles, because I mentioned this on the recent episode of Sovereign Tech. I reinstalled portableapps.com. I had a spare flash drive laying around that's practically indestructible. And I was like, yeah, you know what? Let's put it on and let's see how that goes. What is that like today? I might cover this again in an upcoming episode of Sovereign Tech, but that community for portableapps.com, which is basically an OS on top of an OS. You install it onto a flash drive in any Windows computer, or if you have a good wine setup, you can just plug in your flash drive, and you can open up, and it has its own start menu and everything. And I mean, I've got Firefox on there, I have Telegram on there, Qubit torrents on there, LibreOffice, GIMP, Thunderbird, Sumatra PDF, of course, which is my favorite, as far as what's available on Windows. That's my favorite comic book reader and PDF reader. Warzone 2100. I'm running 7-zip on there. I mean, so much of the software that I use, HexChat, so much of the software that I normally use that I install right away on any computer that I happen to have, I popped on here, and yeah, I got to admit it, I'm really loving this again. And it almost feels like a fresh idea when we are trying to get, because part of what Sovereign Tech does, or part of my mission has been in the past 2-3 years, here's a term that I don't hear anybody else saying, but I think that we need to popularize, and so I'm getting it out here first. Post-cloud. Post-cloud. I want this, and this falls into kind of conversations that we were having last week. This needs to become a thing. So I don't know that it will, but it needs to become a thing. And this is one of those technologies, along with Tails, quite frankly. Which, by the way, I don't think I got to this. I might have left it in the show notes, but I didn't get to this in the last Sovereign Tech. Tails is working on, this year, they are working on making it so that it can boot up even when you have secure boot set up, which most modern computers do have secure boot set up. I would be really intrigued if that would allow Tails to boot up on a Chromebook without having to turn off secure boot. Because again, I mean, one of the arguments for a Chromebook is the security. You don't want to have to turn that off. If Tails can rock that, boy, that would be really, really interesting, and would open up a new market of very inexpensive Tails computers, which I think is only a good thing. So we'll see what happens with that, but I'm excited for that as well. But those Tails, portableapps.com, those are a couple avenues in getting to this, again, post-cloud, culture? Can I call it a culture? Mindset? I don't know. Toss me some ideas if you want, because this is, and I know my listeners, I know you're fucking brilliant, but this is something we got to push. Okay. Anyway, let's I know it's probably not gonna please a lot of sponsors, but I don't give a fuck about that, and my sponsors already know that score. So anyway, we got something for you to check out there. You got a movie to check out. You got portableapps.com to check out again if you haven't lately. Again, it can work in Wine, but it's definitely meant to work to play nice, and it does play nice with Windows 10, but it's definitely meant to play nice with Windows specifically. But you got a couple things there to try out, to check out, to rock. So why don't we get into our questions? All right, so let's pull them up here. Here we go. Well, this is a long one. Whew. That's all right. I like that. Hey, Stallion. Woo. They literally typed out woo. Woo. Right back at you, baby. Loved your review of Rise of Skywalker with Rob. What impressed me the most is, as someone that follows many Star Wars... First off, thank you. Rob and I love getting that kind of feedback. I really appreciate that. This question I could have put into... We have a ton of questions. Let me stop on this for a second. Rob and I are recording TIE Fighter Renegades early this month. We might even do 2 episodes. I don't know. We'll see how that works out. But we're doing it early because there's a bunch of... We got a bunch of, from a great listener, a bunch of Rise of Skywalker questions on Twitter that I don't really want to sit on. And there's also a lot of news. In fact, this question brings it up. There's a lot of news that has come out about Rise of Skywalker specifically that I really want to jump on it fast. Also, Mandalorian's season 1 is done and we want to review that. So we just want to be on top of it. I could have put this question in there, but we have so much to talk about in the episode of TFR, which, I mean, we've done 3-hour episodes. It's not like we couldn't get to it. But I feel like, there's kind of a bigger thing here. And really, as Rob always knows, I mean, if he has a subject he wants to talk about, if he has responses that he wants to bring up to this, and we do a little cross-pollination between a Q&A episode and TIE Fighter Renegades, that's no problem with me. I'll get to it there. But I felt like this is kind of a larger question beyond even just Star Wars. So I want to get to it here. Anyway, but yeah, we love hearing, anytime you have reviews or thoughts about TFR, we absolutely love hearing those. So, all right. Your review of Rise of Skywalker with Rob is great. Loved. You loved it. Anyway, thank you. What impressed me the most is, as someone that follows many Star Wars and genre news sites, you really were the first ones to bring up it says some, but I think you mean so many of the things the TROS visual dictionary solves when it comes to plot holes. Now, for people that don't know, TROS is TROS. That seems to be the common acronym being used for the Rise of Skywalker is TROS, just like, ROTJ is Return of the Jedi, ESB is Empire Strikes Back, A New Hope is A&H, TFA is Force Awakens. I mean, these are common things. So they're calling it TROS. I don't know why I'm surprised it's not just ROS, but okay, TROS is good. That's the one I've seen used too, so that's fine. You really were the first ones to bring up so many of the things the TROS visual dictionary solves when it comes to plot holes. I'm pretty sure I only started seeing other sites and podcasts bring it up weeks later, and Jedi Council hasn't even mentioned it yet. And now everyone is talking about it. Okay, well, I want to, again, there's a lot more here. I want to talk about that for a second. First off, thank you. I appreciate getting that credit. I mean, this is part of the reason that I get my hands on these books so quickly is I do kind of like a bit of first mover action, but I mean, I'm that hungry for this kind of information. Okay. And it's actually going to speak to what I think your larger question is, but we'll get into that. But yeah, thanks. I realized the same thing. Actually, Jedi, let's talk about Jedi Council for a second. So this, at one point, I feel like was the premier, next to Rebel Force Radio, was probably the premier Star Wars podcast in the world. I mean, it really, for years, I felt like it was the biggest thing going. And I like a lot of the guys involved with it. I like Ken Knapsack. I like Christian Harloff, I mean, love him or hate him. The guy knows his shit. And I appreciate that. I stopped, and I think I talked about this at some point, maybe on a Q&A or somewhere I talked about it, or maybe I didn't, but I'm pretty sure I did. I stopped listening to, as soon as I heard that Christian Harloff was leaving Collider Jedi Council, I stopped listening to it. Because I really count on him and Ken Knapsack being able to converse with each other over a lot of the, actually, I think the emailer quotes me on this, but the extraneous material, right? Like the books, the comic books, the games, the other TV series, all of that. I always appreciated that they could get nitty gritty with that, and that whatever guests they would have on that show, that when one of them would say something that in canon is not so, they could very quickly correct them. And I really appreciated that, because a lot of Star Wars podcasts, that is not the case. And that's actually going to speak, I think, also to the question that this person is asking. But, so I stopped with Jedi Council. I went back to it for a little bit just to kind of see, they've been promoting it a lot on some of their channels, and I'm like, okay, what does Jedi Council look like without Christian Harloff on there? And, well, let's just say I'm not impressed. Not that I necessarily have a problem with anybody involved, but I really don't feel like, they spend, just in my opinion, well, first off, and I know they pre-recorded some of the reviews that they've done, but yeah, there was no talk about the visual dictionary. They never talk about Star Wars Resistance. They almost never talk about the comic books. They did talk about the Rise of Kylo Ren. They talked about issue 1 of that, but I think the only reason they did that is because it is in many ways a prequel to the entire sequel trilogy, and it's answering a lot of questions, right, about the Knights of Ren, what happened with Kylo or with Ben Solo, etc. Okay, so because it was being billed as important knowledge for Rise of Skywalker, I think a lot of people were reading that, and that's like the one time that they reviewed it. But in general, they don't bother to talk about it all. They don't talk about any of the novels. Like ever. And they don't talk about any of the reference books, and there have been a ton of reference books that have come out. The only reason sometimes where Rob and I don't get to reviewing a reference book is, we can run out of time, but then we're also going, we're running out of time after 3 hours, right? That's where Collider Jedi Council is lucky if it goes an hour. Yeah, I'm not impressed by the show. And actually, there's not a Star Wars podcast out there that I'm impressed by at all right now. Rebel Force Radio, I don't think is doing their best work. And maybe a lot of people are just fed up with Star Wars, or they feel like there's too much or something like that. Hey, you know what? That's fine. Then don't do a fucking Star Wars podcast, okay? How about that? So, I'm not, understand me. I'm not saying this because I am involved, okay? Or because, someone that I absolutely consider my very real brother, that being Rob, and not because he's involved. I'm saying, bar none, TIE Fighter Renegades is it's the best Star Wars podcast out there. Because I listened to the rest of them, and they don't deep dive. They don't cover everything that comes out Star Wars. We cover everything. Even if it takes us a little while, like, we were waiting for issue 40 to talk up some more Dr. Aphra, whatever. But that's because we're trying to give you a cohesive whole when it's all said and done. These other podcasts, they just ignore it and pretend it's not out there. And again, this point is going to speak to, I think, the question being asked here. But yeah, but thank you for giving us the credit. That means a lot, especially to me, in fact, Rob asked the question. He's like, do you think Brian needs to read every goddamn thing Star Wars? And he wanted to, hear back from listeners. We did not revisit that question yet, basically because the next episode was a full review of Rise of Skywalker. But the bulk of you actually really like that I do that. And so there we go. And in a way I like it too, even if sometimes it's a little torturous, but whatever. Especially when I listen to a lot of these other Star Wars podcasts and none of them even bother, it just emboldens me, frankly, to be that walking encyclopedia. And folks, that's a reputation I've had since I was in high school. And I don't mean for Star Wars. I mean for fucking everything. You know, we're talking at a time before there was a Google, before there was Wikipedia or anything, you know. If you had a good amount of, I don't know, you know, as far as like all knowledge in the universe, I mean, if you're doing about 4%, which I'd say I was at about, that's not bad, you know, and you used to get credit for that. But now everybody can just be stupid and, well, that's all right, Google will know. I'll let Google know. Or, oh yeah, it's okay, I'll check Wikipedia. I don't have to actually have it in my head. Anyway, I guess people like walking around stupid. What a surprise. So let's carry on, shall we? I'm also surprised. Here we go. So yeah, so now everyone's talking about it. And I've noticed this too. Like I said, I follow a lot of these sources, and I didn't notice until, just like you, a few days later, that suddenly people started writing stories about the visual dictionary and, you know, and so on. That's when people started putting some puzzle pieces together. And some of them were very good stories, but regardless, it took a lot of time when really this information was, I would, to use a term, was mission critical to this film. But regardless, let's keep going. I'm also surprised, this is the rest of the question here, I'm also surprised at how many headlines J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio are getting, having to explain so many things in the film. The kiss, the ending, and so on. Let's comment on that for a minute. So yeah, this is something that's happening, but you know what? The same thing happened with The Force Awakens, right? Where J.J. Abrams had to explain a bunch of shit, like, you know, why did Leia not hug Chewbacca after Han died? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, this isn't exactly new, though it does seem like, I mean, because this movie does have, or does appear to have plot holes. I'm not saying there aren't some in there, but there aren't as many as a lot of YouTubers, podcasters, and commentators are claiming. I mean, if you just watch the movies, if all you do, and this is going to be a major point to what we're getting to here, and we kind of talked about this in TFR, and I'm sure it's going to come up again on the show or in future episodes. But if you are somebody that all you did is you watched episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like you just watched the movies. Yeah, I totally get you that in episode 9, there are 10 billion plot holes. Okay, like I really, really get what you're talking about. However, if you dig deeper, if you go outside of that, a lot of those plot holes get solved. But again, we'll save this. But bringing that up, yeah, like now, basically, J.J. Abrams has said that the kiss between Kylo Ren and Rey was not romantic, so there was no real love there. Which, I mean, my thoughts on, I'm sure we'll talk about this on TFR as well. I mean, kind of my thoughts on that are like, he didn't really explain what the kiss was then, you know, if it's not romantic, but at the same time, that's a little hopeful because, I mean, let's be clear here, like Kylo Ren killed Han Solo. I mean, he's often however many people throughout the sequel trilogy and everything. I mean, he was like a genuinely bad guy, but he does one good thing and suddenly he deserves a kiss from, the female savior of the universe. Wait, what? You know, that's like kissing Ted Bundy. If he saves somebody from getting hit by a car. No, that's outrageous. And so for him to come out and say it's not romantic, like, yeah, okay, let's not normalize making out with psychopaths in Hollywood. Is that all right? Yeah, I think that's good. Say nothing of the fact that he's a whiny fucking baby. All right. Anyway, let's go on. Ellen's looking behind me. Here she is. She's painting this beautiful picture. I love this. I'm podcasting. She's painting this beautiful picture. What art is getting created here? But she's just like laughing at me here when I'm saying this stuff. All right, well, come on, Ellen. I mean, Kylo Ren, whiny fucking baby or what?
He has some emotional issues, yeah.
He has some emotional issues. Psychopath? Is that unfair?
No, I think he really wants to be accepted.
He wants to be accepted.
He wants to be loved.
He wants to be loved.
But he feels like he's been rejected.
He's been rejected. So he goes all psychopath and he's been friend zoned too much in his life or something. Whatever.
Yeah, he lashes out.
I don't think that's healthy. Would you kiss a guy like that?
Fuck no.
Yeah, fuck no. There you go. Okay, there you go. Ellen can speak for all women, and she did. No. It's ridiculous. Did you think the kiss was earned? Did you like the kiss at all?
Not exactly.
Not exactly.
I feel like it was a little forced.
Forced, but woo! Always there with the puns. That one. Anyway, thank you, Ellen. I love you. Anyway. So, so, I mean, all right, fine. Like, I get it why JJ is coming out and speaking out against, kissing psychopaths. I think that's a very good thing. But the ending, I'm trying to remember what exactly Chris Terrio said something about the ending. I don't even remember what the fuck it was now, because everybody's having a fucking hissy fit over the fact that she used the name Skywalker and blah, 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 and whatever. Yes, it is amazing how many stories and how much J.J. Abrams, Chris Terrio, whoever else has had to come out and try to resolve issues that people have with this movie. When amazingly, I mean, really, and I don't think it's unfair to say, the whole purpose of this movie is to resolve every fucking issue that every Star Wars fan has ever had with the films. Keyword there, films, right down to Chewbacca getting a medal handed to him, which I didn't mind, but regardless, I get that it is very weird. But let's be clear that I don't think this is unique to Rise of Skywalker. I think Force Awakens had the same deal. To some degree, The Last Jedi had this, where Rian Johnson was really out in front of it. But anyway, nothing new here. But it is amazing how much there is. I will give it that. All right, let's keep reading the question here. It makes me wonder about something you've brought up often, though. I know you don't mind reading everything outside of what is sold to the masses, but doesn't this all seem like a failure on Disney/Hollywood's part to get this stuff in the film for everyone to understand at first watch? I'm much more of the opinion that if it's important to the story, it should be in the film. Tross, or Rise of Skywalker, is really the first film I can think of, except for maybe Inception, where quote-unquote extraneous material, as you call it, genuinely mattered to what is going on. All right, let's stop on that for a second. Yeah, so, and in fact, I as far as I know, I'm the only person that told anybody about this. But there was a comic book. I want to say that it either came out, maybe it did both. It either came out on a free comic book day, or it came with like the DVD or Blu-ray release of Inception, of the movie Inception. The Christopher Nolan film with DiCaprio there. I always want to call him Decapitated, but DiCaprio. There's Ellen laughing again.
I can't help it.
This is why I love her. She laughs at my jokes that aren't funny.
You're so funny.
Thanks. Anyway, so yeah, the movie with Christopher Nolan and Decapitated there, or Leonardo Decapitated. I told people, like, read the comic book, because the comic book actually explains a little bit more about, or gives you some closure with the film, because the film leaves so many things open-ended. I'm not going to tell you what it says. You go out and find it, okay? I won't spoil that one for you. So, but this person obviously, because I've mentioned this before, obviously read it, and good for you. I would say there's other movies, though, where this has been the case, and I have brought these up as well. For example, the 2001 Planet of the Apes movie, which I'm a big fan of the Planet of the Apes franchise in general. But I really liked, and I don't like Tim Burton, but I like Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes. I thought that was a very well done film, a gorgeous film, quite frankly. Tremendous soundtrack. I mean, that was a total package of a movie. But it had an ending where it was like, what the fuck was that? And everybody was talking about it, which is the point, right? Because everybody was talking about the ending of the original Planet of the Apes, that Rod Serling wrote back in the 60s. Now, if you bought the DVD, and ironically, this also speaks to something and another question that the next question that we have after I get through this one, but also speaks to what we were talking about earlier with Aniara. Buying physical copies of these movies, you get things that Netflix, even Disney Plus, though Disney Plus does have an extras tab, which I appreciate. And I know Netflix does have like some post shows that they've started to put out for like Stranger Things and whatever, but whatever, that's for cultists. But Netflix and Hulu and a lot of these other streaming services will never, they basically, I mean, unless they put PDFs there or something, they can't offer it. And I don't think they're ever going to bother, because the model of the streaming service that could offer all of this was, the Stargate Command, which shut down, which we've talked about in previous Q&As. Because that offered like a complete package where you could read the books along with watch all the episodes of the show and everything. And that, for whatever reason, I mean, we don't know if it exactly financially failed, but we assume that it financially failed, which is why it got shut down. Unless MGM has other plans, maybe they're going to come out with something, I don't know, like an MGM channel, which don't do it. But maybe that's what they have in mind. Or maybe they're selling off the Stargate franchise to Disney. Fuck, I wouldn't be surprised if that should happen. But anyway, bottom line is that streaming services cannot give you everything that these movies are about. And this is, I mean, let me comment kind of on what you said here, that it should be in the film for you to understand. Hollywood has done this stuff before even home video was a thing. For example, David Lynch's Dune, right, which came out in the early 80s. David Lynch's Dune, and VHS and Betamax existed, but it wasn't, it wasn't that big of a deal at the time, okay? Or it wasn't as big a deal as it would later become in the preceding, or in the preceding decade. But like when you went to go see Dune back in the early 80s, you were given at the theater, you were given a card. When you bought your ticket, you were given a card that explained all of the characters in the movie. Why? Because in the movie, there wasn't a whole lot, or I guess Hollywood or the bean counters or whoever thought this. I don't imagine it was David Lynch, but whoever thought this thought that there wasn't enough info in the film for you to understand what's going on. And so you were given a card that would basically, explain all of this. So it's not like Hollywood hasn't done this even before home video was the thing. They have. There have been times where they felt that it was necessary. That's the most famous case I know of. I'm sure there have been others, though I don't know what they are. I mean, one way movies used to get around this is you had an opening crawl. Of course, Star Wars already has an opening crawl, right? Ironically, and this is something I agree with a lot of critics on for Rise of Skywalker, ironically, the opening crawl is not only like odd in a very occult way, in my opinion, but it's also, I think, the shortest opening crawl that we've ever had in a Star Wars film. And there are a lot of things that happen in the movie that frankly could have been said in the opening crawl, and we could have spent a lot more time in the movie at least breathing or concentrating on other things. And some people have brought that up where, hey, this scene really could have just been in an opening crawl. And I'm like, yeah, all of that would have made sense. Even, frankly, the fate of General Organa could have been done. It could have been done in the opening crawl, and people would have understood based upon the real world happenstance around that. But regardless, this is a thing, having this extraneous stuff. But yeah, where I was with that is the 2001 2-disc special edition DVD release of Planet of the Apes gave you a possible explanation of what happened at the end of Planet of the Apes, right? When Mark Wahlberg's character returns to Earth. And so nothing new here. People wanted it, and so in some form or fashion, Hollywood gave it to them. That does happen. Now, we'll comment on more on what you said, but let me finish reading more of the question here. I think I already know your opinion, but is this a writing fail on Hollywood's part, or is this just the future of money grabbing? Always appreciate your thoughts, Man of Tomorrow. Thank you, as always. Remember, and folks, if you don't like all the entertainment talk, you just send in other questions and we'll get to them. The past 2 weeks, I've done almost exclusively tech talks, or even tech culture talks, or questions, I should say. But anyway, so yeah, let me reread the last bit here. I'm much more of the opinion, this is the question asker, or the emailer. I'm much more of the opinion that if it's important to the story, it should be in the film. Rise of Skywalker is really the first film I can think of where extraneous material, as you call it, genuinely mattered to what is going on. I think I already know your opinion, but is this a writing fail on Hollywood's part, or is this just the future of money grabbing? Always appreciate your thoughts. Or yeah, anyway, I read that part. So, is it a failure? ultimately, yes, right? But that depends, because the answer it can really be a little bit of both on this, and there's a lot to expand upon with this. Okay. And you said you already know my answer. Well, I've kind of already talked about this in the past, that I think if you are a fan of a franchise and you have read all the comic books, read all the books, read all the technical manuals, you've gone, balls deep on your favorite franchise, I think you should get rewarded for that somehow. And it doesn't take much. It really doesn't require much. Like when I watch The Mandalorian, I get rewarded with my technical knowledge of the Star Wars universe nonstop. Like all the time I feel like I'm getting rewarded for that. And it's awesome. And actually I was talking with Rob a bit about this because of something that happened on the last episode of The Mandalorian. And basically, talk about the news media writing about this. Everybody starts writing about it, and I'm sure we'll talk about this on TFR. Everybody starts writing about it saying, here is what this thing is in The Mandalorian. And Rob said it straight up. He says, yeah, this just proves that the news media or the media, it's just for the dum-dums. And they thrive on this. And that gets at another angle of this as well, as far as what's going on. I don't think it would be hard to believe, especially for Disney, who owns a ton of news outlets. Okay. I would not be, making movies in a way that get people talking or that require explanation after the fact, etc. That require stories to get written by news organizations after they come out. That's money. That generates money. It's not even a matter of, okay, do I need to buy the visual dictionary to understand this film? Oh, no. The money grabbing can come from just forcing people to have to click on websites and, clickbaity headlines and stories to understand what the fuck they just saw. And I wouldn't put it past Disney that that's planned, or Hollywood in general, that is something that is planned. And not just Hollywood. Amazon Studios, they own the Washington Post, Amazon does. Netflix, go down the list of them. Where they have shall I say, an unholy alliance with news organizations and news outlets. And so that they almost dumb this stuff down on purpose. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. I can't exactly prove that, but I've talked about this before where, like IO9, right? Which I haven't gone to that site. I can't even remember the last time I went there. Anyway, like IO9, they would, and this was, in fact, I know season 2 of this just came out. When did season 1 of Lost in Space on? It is absolute shit on a stick, that show. Just about everything new, but it's horrible. When did that first come out? 2017? Or maybe early 2018? 6 months before, actually it was about a year before Lost in Space aired on Netflix, or the news actually dropped. It was 6 months before the news dropped that Netflix was making a Lost in Space remake show. IO9 started writing a bunch of stories about Lost in Space. Now, me, and to this day, I try to find fans of the original Lost in Space. Now, if I go talk to people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, I can find plenty of people that love that show. Why? Because it's fucking entertaining when it was on. Okay, and people used to have good tastes. Of course, that's all gone out the window too. Thank you, YouTube. But now, nobody likes it. So, wait a minute, why the fuck is IO9 writing these stories about how, about Lost in Space and how it was this and that? It's because it's predictive programming. It's getting people ready, giving them a sense of history, and then when the announcement comes out from Netflix 6 months later that, hey, we're making a Lost in Space show, then all these all of these people on Twitter, are like, oh yeah, I know about Lost in Space, even though I hadn't heard about it until 6 months ago. And then they can act like, oh, I've always been a fucking fan. I can't wait for the Netflix show, Netflix show. That way, I can talk to people around the water cooler because I have nothing actually going on inside of me to even bother to, to converse with people about. And I'm so self-centered, I can't actually talk to a person about what's going on for them. So thankfully, now I can pretend that I cared about something that's decades old and I can feel important about myself. Thank you, Lost in Space. Thank you, Netflix. I love being in your cult. Woo! I guarantee you that goes on. That's happening. That is totally planned out, and it happens a lot. I'm kind of hoping people have finally gotten a little wise to that, but maybe they haven't. Or even when a Twitter hashtag suddenly goes viral, next thing you know, well, shit, like whatever that hashtag was about is, next thing you know, there's like a movie or something getting made about it or whatever. I mean, it's absolutely insane. I wouldn't be surprised if studios are working with some YouTube shows. Like, say, even like, and look, I like Toy Galaxy. Actually, I love Toy Galaxy. I think it's a lot of fun. I wouldn't be surprised if studios are working with Toy Galaxy and keeping an eye, like here, hey, talk about GoBots this week. And let's see if there's an audience for it. Let's see what the reaction is around that. And maybe we'll go forward and make a GoBots movie next or something like that. I mean, a lot of shit going on behind the scenes. It's all, yeah. So, okay. That said, I mean, that's another angle to all of this. Like, why are there suddenly a ton of stories of, J.J. Abrams or Chris Terrio or whoever, trying to explain what happened in Rise of Skywalker? I mean, that might be totally on purpose. There's no such thing as bad press, right? Now, let's get to what you're talking about here. Is this money grabbing? I mean, the idea of studios like Disney and others finally caring about the concept of canonicity, of things being canon. CBS is doing this with Star Trek as well. That is definitely a money grabbing affair, right? Because they didn't care before. I mean, they really did not care before. And in fact, even I still don't know. And maybe, I'm going to find somebody to tweet at, somebody who's somehow in charge of Star Trek. I was told, according to, and you can look this up, Brannon Braga, okay, actually an old buddy of mine, Brannon Braga, one of the top guys behind Star Trek, ended up running Enterprise until he handed over to Manny Cotto, okay, back in the early aughts. He wrote a comic book, a miniseries called Hive, which was all about kind of closing out the story of the Borg after what happened with Voyager and everything, right? I mean, it had its two main characters were Picard and Seven of Nine. This comic book would not appear to fit in well with everything we know about the new Picard show coming out. But Brannon Braga, when this comic book came out, made it a point. He said, this is canon. But then it seems pretty clear this is not what's going on at Picard. So what am I supposed, like, what's actually, what's canon here? Like, how does this work? And I mean, we could get into a huge conversation around the validity of any kind of what canonicity is, and like, does it even have any real meaning or weight anymore now that it is basically, I mean, at the end of the day, yes, it really is a marketing tool for whatever studio and whatever franchise. It is a money grab. And that, I mean, that's a shame. I feel like it kind of always has been a money grab. Frankly, when things weren't canon, like when Star Trek novels used to not be canon, that felt like an easy money grab, right? Because then it's not really what happened with these characters. But then, I mean, we could get into a huge conversation around that, right? Because that's what Gene Roddenberry said. And they used what Gene Roddenberry said as being canon. But then, something you got to understand about Gene Roddenberry is, and I've brought this up many times, and in the last episode I did of Sovereign Trek, I kind of went on a whole monologue about it, or diatribe, I should say. He really had no control over, I mean, he had maybe a grand total out of, how long has Star Trek been going? Depending upon which way you want to count it, almost 50 years. He had a grand total of maybe 4 years out of that where he had any kind of say. Did you know, you might not know this, did you know that Gene Roddenberry hated the fact that in, everybody's favorite fucking Star Trek movie, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, he thought it was completely out of character for Kirk to shoot the SETI eel, right? When it comes out of when it comes out of Chekhov's ear, the thing that's taken over Chekhov's mind, that really, quote unquote disgusting thing that Khan puts in their ears, and he blasts it with a phaser, and Kirk has this look of disgust, and Roddenberry came right out and said, it's like, wait a minute, how that's a life form? How dare Kirk look at it with disgust, and how dare he shoot first without even trying to talk to this thing, or whatever. And I got to go with Roddenberry on this one. So the issue of what's really canon. I mean, fuck, when the creator of Star Trek doesn't even get his shots called. I mean, what is canon at that point, right? I mean, this gets into a very big conversation that we could go down, as far as that goes. As far as who gets to decide what's canon and what's not, right? I mean, I would argue Roddenberry gets to call what's canon, but CBS and Paramount, oh no, they wouldn't have that at all. And they only use Roddenberry as basically as like a figurehead. Kind of reminds me of the episode of the original series Patterns of Force. That's kind of weird. Anyway, so we got to get back on track here. So yeah, if something's really important to understanding a film, should it be in the film? Ultimately, yes. And with Rise of Skywalker specifically, I really have no idea why this movie is ultimately so short. It's only 2 hours and change? 2 hours and 13 minutes, something like that? Did they think people wouldn't be able to sit through a 3-hour Star Wars movie? I think that's outrageous. Of course they could. So there's a lot that, even with the very difficult task of repairing a lot of things, that whether or not you think that was necessary, it's what JJ was doing, okay? Why he couldn't take the time, and really he could, I mean, in 3 hours you can fit in 2 movies at that point, right? Because that's the big problem here with Rise of Skywalker, is it's really 2 films in one, and it just goes by so fast, and you don't get a lot of explanation, and you have to go read the visual dictionary to get some explanation on a bunch of things. And even then, sometimes things are like, wait, what the fuck? This doesn't make any sense at all. And then we have to read a million stories that have come out. In fact, you know what? While I'm recording this, suddenly I got a notification of, let's see. Yeah, here it is from a Showbiz cheat sheet. And this is bullshit, but whatever. It's here's why that Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker ending leaves out these characters. Of course, it's a totally clickbait headline. What characters? Oh, you got to click to find out. You got to get our ad impressions. And, wait a minute. Okay, if there's characters left out, shouldn't the movie have explained that? And why do we have to have an entire story explaining the ending of a movie when the movie should be explaining itself, kind of like this emailer had said? I get you. I hear you. I really understand that. But, I want to push back on this a little bit. Okay? And that is Star Wars itself. And this has been a massive problem. This is a massive problem right now. Okay? With a lot of the reviews that I've heard for Rise of Skywalker, even from people I respect, like Retroblasting. He just did, is his name Michael over there? He just did a review talking about how, I don't know, all the problems with Star Wars going on and everything. And I've heard him talk about Star Wars in other places, and I'm just like, and you hear other reviews about this, and they're complaining about everything, all these plot holes in Rise of Skywalker and all this stuff. Plot holes that do have answers in comics, books, reference material, etc. Even video games. It's okay for somebody who's not that invested into a franchise. It doesn't just have to be Star Wars. It could be Star Trek too. It could be fucking anything. Okay. It's okay to not be that invested and go and see a movie, because clearly they want you to still go and see this movie. Because, I mean, if Disney was only counting on the people that read every comic book and watched all the Clone Wars and did all this blah, 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 to go and see Rise of Skywalker, they wouldn't have made their budget back. They wouldn't even remotely made their budget back. And I know, because I think a somewhat fair gauge of hardcore Star Wars fandom is how many people watched the Star Wars show. Now, I get it why people might have trailed off from watching the Star Wars show, because That's basically marketing in and of itself. But even when the Star Wars show was white hot, or even like, say, Rebels Recon, you'd be lucky to get 20,000 views on each of these things. And I've talked about that before on TFR, but me personally, I take that as a gauge as, all right, who's hardcore? Who's got to know every fucking thing, about Star Wars? And I'm not here to tell you, I'm not really the person that ultimately decides who's a real Star Wars fan and who's not. Ultimately, I don't fucking care. Okay? But to me, the number sits somewhere around 20,000 people. And maybe there's a bunch of kids that just don't know yet, but even that, okay, fine, double it. I don't know. You have about 20,000, hardcore fans out there. Fine. I can accept that. I can accept that I am a rare breed, okay? Or that Rob is a rare breed, when we're talking Star Wars. I totally get that. And ultimately, I don't really have a problem with that. And do I understand that it's not economically feasible to just try and appease me? Yeah, I kind of get that. But here's the rub. You have a lot of these people who are making, like I said, kind of retro blasting. And there have been a few others. I mean, even like Midnight's Edge. Go down the list of them. Okay. They are complaining that the Forbes, various media outlets aren't being intellectually honest and are calling out boogeymen like the fans and whatever else, okay, as far as, ruining Star Wars because J.J. Abrams is trying to appease them, blah, blah, blah. Or, they're basically saying that a lot of reviewers are not being intellectually honest, or people that loved Rise of Skywalker, fans, are not being intellectually honest, that they are purposely, like one of the claims that Retroblasting specifically made. Again, I respect him and I really like that guy's work. Okay, but something that he specifically made claim is that he talks to fans who he brings up the plot holes to them, and those fans say, "Oh, I don't care about that. I don't care." Like they ignore all these plot holes and they just kind of like blindly. And he even uses an example of he said, "This is basically this is Disney able to sell a car to people with no wheels, and they just buy it because it's from Disney, and and even though it can't go anywhere." But I think that kind, and Midnight's Edge kind of talked the same way. A lot of these other people talk the same way. I think that's being intellectually dishonest. Because if they were doing their due diligence, which they're claiming that everybody else that might have actually liked the movie Rise of Skywalker, that they're not doing their due diligence, or that the media outlets aren't doing their due diligence. No, they're not doing their due diligence. Because if they were doing their due diligence, they would know, okay, the answers are out there. They're in these books. I don't want to buy them. I don't care about Star Wars that much. So whatever, and that's fine. But recognize that no, these are not plot holes. There are answers out there, and it doesn't have to be answers on Showbiz Cheat Sheet or Polygon or pick the dumbass news outlet. Okay, there are answers that are in actual Star Wars material that are designed to be sold off to fans, just like the movie was, right? Now that gets to your point of, is this okay? Is that an okay thing? That's a gamble for anyone to make, okay? For any creator effectively to make, or any studio to make. If they want to take a gamble on a multimedia experience, they are totally within their rights to make that gamble, right? For example, Warner Brothers with The Matrix. They had the Animatrix, which explained a lot of what happened in Matrix Reloaded, and they had the entire game Enter the Matrix, which also had full cutscenes, fully produced, full budget, the whole thing, full motion video, that also explained a lot of what was going on in the movie Matrix Reloaded. And I would argue you can't even really appreciate the Matrix sequels without taking in the game Enter the Matrix and the short films of the Animatrix. You can't even grasp the entirety of the Matrix without taking those things in. Now, if you don't want to, that's fine. And if you are dissatisfied as a moviegoer, that's fine. But don't accuse the film of missing things when no, the film didn't miss things. It's just that you needed to go into other realms of media, other mediums, other venues to get everything that's going on. If that pisses you off that you have to do that, fine. But that is wholly different from claiming something is a plot hole, or if it's just you being annoyed that you have to do more than just sit your ass down and watch a movie. Those are two separate things. And that's okay. Look, you don't want to do it. I'm not telling you have to do shit. I'm an anarchist. I'm not going to force anybody to do a goddamn thing. Okay? But let's be honest here. Let's be intellectually honest and say, I mean, look, there is, in very cinematic ways, as in production, in matters of production, Rise of Skywalker has a billion flaws. The pacing is wrong. The music is kind of unimpressive. There's a million things about it that are off. Okay, that just come down to, just down to production of the actual movie. Okay? And we can complain about those, and I do, all day long. And that's fine. But like to complain about like story elements and all that other stuff, look, if you are not invested in Star Wars, and I know I've already said this in a couple other episodes elsewhere in some other media, but bottom line, Star Wars is more than movies, and it has been more than movies for decades. And even Disney doesn't even really grasp this, even though they're trying to make a money grab by making it more than the movies. Star Wars is way more than movies. Is the original trilogy a great trilogy of films? Stands on its own? You never need anything else? You bet your ass it is. It's awesome. They are great movies. No, you get no argument from me. They are the best Star Wars movies. And overall, they're always going to be. But once it got past that, once George Lucas stopped making more, in 83, stopped making more of this juggernaut that was Star Wars, the franchise, then other people who are like, hey, we can make money off of this brand and we can do really cool shit, and they did it out of passion, like West End Games and so on. They picked up the ball and ran with it, and then all these Star Wars fans were just hungry for some more fucking Star Wars. They picked it, they started buying whatever the fuck was out there. George Lucas eventually kind of had to respond to some of this and make some sense of it, and so you had different levels of canon and all that, and all that's fine. But nobody seems to get this, that, if you just watch the Star Wars movies, you are missing out. And you watch them and you don't get why there's these people who are just nutso about it and that do whole podcasts about it, like me. Yeah, you don't get it. Like you can't get it because there's so much more that Star Wars is. And I would argue, and I've said this many times now, that the greatest things in Star Wars aren't even in the movies. They're not there. Fuck. You know what the greatest thing? Here, I'll call this right now. You know what the greatest thing in Star Wars is? Season 5 of Clone Wars. That's the best. In fact, I'd almost put that above the original trilogy of movies. Almost. But that's the greatest fucking thing in Star Wars. And, I mean, poll people at the premiere of Rise of Skywalker. Ask them how many of them got past season 2 of Clone Wars. Most of them did not. And they are missing out on the most, in something that is absolutely not a kid show. It is absolutely not a kid show. You would never show a child anything so wildly violent with the raw amount of death and body chopping and all the shit that happens. I mean, you just wouldn't. You'd never show that to them. That's not a kid show. Not even close. Get over yourself. And there's so many things. I mean, like there's things that happen in The Mandalorian, of course, which is done by the same guy that was working on Clone Wars, Dave Filoni, that where there's a lot of cross-pollination there. And we know that nobody watched Star Wars because whatever, these fucking news sites had to put up shit that tried to explain stuff that happened in the Clone Wars, when it's like, wait a minute, but if you're watching Star Wars and you love Star Wars, didn't you watch Clone Wars? Don't you know the score? Like, didn't you even watch the high notes of Clone Wars? Because there's great guides on how to watch just like the really important arcs that happen in Clone Wars, so you don't have to watch the whole series. Because believe me, I'm with you. The first couple seasons, that is some rough stuff to get through. But when you get to the later on, oh hell, you are in for some of the best. So it's okay. You don't, you're not that into Star Wars. You don't get all that. But then you got to come, you should come right out with a disclaimer saying that, hey, you know what? I haven't read all the extra stuff. So I don't know, maybe all this is explained somewhere else. And with Star Wars, I pretty much guarantee it is. I mean, yeah, Snoke was, and I complained the fuck out of that, because if there was an explanation, I would be the person that would have encountered it, and we didn't get anything until we got a little something in the expanded edition book, the novelization of The Last Jedi, which, again, I'll stand by this. The novelization of Rise of Skywalker is going to be awesome. I know that's going to be a great Star Wars book, because it's going to have the time to breathe. There's going to be more stuff in it. They're probably going to explain a lot more, blah, blah, blah. But what is the average person reviewing Rise of Skywalker going to do? They're never going to touch it. They're not going to care about it. And they're just going to say, fuck, plot holes, and whatever. And yeah, I get it. As a movie, standing on its own, not good. Okay. But then you should be prefacing it with that instead of attacking and making fun of people that enjoyed the film. And maybe they enjoyed the film because, I don't know, maybe they caught it a couple times for one, which, I mean, can you take in any movie in one shot? Some, I suppose, like your average run of the night or, run of the mill run through on Netflix. It's with something starring, what the fuck's that idiot's name? Ryan Reynolds. Fuck. I can't, the guy just, like, when he looks at the screen, I wish I had, like, it was the old, like, the Middle Ages, and I wish I had a bunch of tomatoes to just toss at it. He is so goddamn annoying. That face should never be on another piece of fucking celluloid ever again. He's not even funny. He's a goof. Anyway, sorry. Where was I? So anyway, besides maybe a Netflix movie, can you actually, like, fully appreciate, any film in just one watch? Probably not. So, okay, so you're a reviewer, you're only going to watch the movie once. You're not going to bother to go into extraneous materials that a lot of science fiction franchises have. Star Wars is not the only one, even though it's unique in its more of its popularity, I guess. But it's not a new thing, whatsoever. I mean, Alien has all this stuff. Star Trek has all this. Babylon 5. Go down the fucking list. This is not uncommon. It's funny, actually, thinking about it. I mean, as horrible as Game of Thrones, the show, is, and I said the show, as horrible as that is, I am impressed by the amount of people that geek out about that show and get into the extraneous material around that. That is an impressive feat. But maybe that's what Disney saw, because everybody's copying Game of Thrones. Maybe that's what Disney saw and was like, oh, well, we can do something with selling off all this extraneous shit that can get people excited and make a buck off of. But the reviewers got to come out and I mean, we got to put these things into context. Is that we have entered an era, ultimately, where it's something that was tried in the 90s. It wasn't really ready yet. The Matrix tried it, like I said, where multimedia is something that these companies are banking on. They are expecting you to play the mobile game. They are expecting you to play, to read this book. They are expecting you to pick up these comic books. They are expecting you to do whatever. We do not live in the world where you just watch a movie and the movie stands on its own. I mean, those still exist, but like the big franchises, that's not happening anymore. I mean, and we know this because Kevin Feige, head of Marvel with Disney, Kevin Feige came right out and said, if you don't watch the TV shows on Disney Plus, you are not going to understand what happens in future Marvel movies. He's telling you straight up, you cannot just consume the movies anymore. Is this money grabbing? Sure. Ultimately, fine. If we end up with great art out of it, dynamite. Okay. But, I mean, we got to be clear on this. And it's really annoying to me to see all of these people not admit that. Like I've seen so many people review Rise of Skywalker, and not one of them have brought up the fact that, or it was even the same way with Solo, when suddenly you found out Maul was still alive. People are like, wait, Maul's alive? It's like, yes, motherfucker. Haven't you been following Star Wars, even though, since 2005? I guess not. So why are you talking about it on the screen? But whatever. I digress. Again, I guess ultimately to answer your question, this has been a very long rant, and I might even skip my last question because this has gone so long. There's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with doing this. Disney has done some degree of being out in front. Like they released the episode 7 of The Mandalorian early to make sense to because it had a connection to Rise of Skywalker, and it did. It in a way. They are really trying to tell you, come out in front and saying you have to do this to experience this. How do you get people to really do that? I don't know. Could you put it in the beginning of the movie somehow? Like say, hey, make sure you go and read this. Well, that's not going to help when you're actually sitting in front of the movie. I don't know how to make that happen. Maybe there's going to be a generation where this sort of like the up and coming generation, the kids these days are going to be used to this. And this isn't going to be a problem in 20 years. I wouldn't be surprised by that. And Bob Iger has plainly come out and said that they have a 100-year plan with Star Wars. They are expecting this thing to continually grow and have some, and I imagine they have a lot of lost leaders going and all this, and fine. But yeah, I get it. If it's important, should it be in the movie? The answer to that is yes, but then the answer is also no. Because if you are trying to make something more, if you are trying to be bigger and, get on a grander scale, there's nothing wrong with doing that. I think the only real problem here is just that the reviewers aren't willing to be honest about that's the world we live in now. They're not caught up with the times, or they're not buying into what Disney's selling, which that's fine. But then they really should come out and say, yeah, this gets answered here, but I don't care about that, and they should say that. So I hope I answered your question. I hope this made some kind of sense. I got to stop there because we just got to. I could talk for hours, and we got to have a cutoff point here, okay? So the second question that I got for this week, see, as someone who loves Blu-rays, I can't believe you love eBooks. Hail Satan. Okay. I think there's a conversation to have around that. Maybe I'll save it for next week. I mean, the easy thing I can tell you is that aside from the way that a paper book, and I totally understand this, okay, a paper book activates all of your senses. There is the smell of the pages. There is the touch of the pages. There are, every sense you've got gets activated when you pick up a paper book, and it's part of what allows you to get engrossed into the book. It is a beautiful relationship that we have with another object. It really is. I'm not taking anything away from that. Okay. The thing is, my argument, and I'll be quick on this, my argument for Blu-rays is that, frankly, a lot of them, like when movies get pirated, and Satan bless those people, like really, the pirates, you've been saving media for decades, and you've been also saving us from the cloud future too, in a very real way, and the streaming services. So the pirates don't always get it right. Okay, for years I could not find and this is another thing that got me into, okay, so let's spend just a few minutes because this really won't take long. This is not what got me to get Blu-rays, but it was part of my justification to get into Blu-rays again, because for the longest time I didn't care. Part of my justification is I was trying to find Rocky IV without all the subtitles, and all I wanted was the translation of what the Russian was saying. You have no idea how hard it was to find that a version. In fact, I never really found, I think to this day, I haven't found like Yiffy, and you go to the guys who are like these pirate cartels that give you these movies. There's times where like it misses shit, like you don't know what the Russian is saying in Rocky IV. That's crazy, right? You really can't appreciate the film. I mean, like, it's awesome when Ivan Drago, starts going, Yas Vinyat, and he's saying, for me. It's a beautiful moment in the film. And if you don't have the fucking subtitles, you're fucked. And an amazing, huge part of the movie, in turn in the film, you don't get. So the pirates don't always get things right. And it becomes very, very difficult to do that. To rely on that when you're trying to, especially when you're trying to show people, some of the greatest movies ever made. Ultimately, I'll be honest with this, what made me get into Blu-rays again was, Elle and I became, let's just call it, we became best friends over time. And I was sharing these important movies with my best friend. And I'm like, no, you know what? This is, I think we were watching Dune. And the quality, you saw the pixelation was just too much, and it was, and we're talking about on a 720p television. It wasn't like, oh, fuck it, okay, so it didn't upconvert to 4K, who cares? No. This was a 720p television. The quality should have been fine. And she didn't care, because she's wonderful. But, I'm like, no, this is unacceptable. Like, if I'm going to show my best friend, the best shit ever made, she's going to see it in the best quality that is possible. And understand, I don't mean 4K. I mean, 1080p is really as much as the human eye can appreciate. So you stop there. But I was going to make sure it was at least that. That's really what got me into Blu-rays again. Was just like, no, yeah, wow. I'd realized as I go through these movies and I want to show Ellen this and show Ellen this and all this stuff, right? I'd realize what it's missing. Now, I didn't notice it before because I was just looking at it through my eyes and I already know all this shit by heart. Right? But then if it's to somebody new, well, that sucks. I say all this to say that, and there's other great arguments for Blu-rays, right? Like Blu-rays give you, making specials, commentaries, which almost never, you can get commentary tracks on downloads of movies. In fact, speaking of Star Wars, I love downloading pirated versions of the Star Wars films because people will put in the riff tracks, right? Which is the MST3K guys. They'll put in the riff tracks commentary right into the file. And that's something I'm never going to get on Blu-ray, right? I really, and certainly not on Disney Plus. I really appreciate that. So, that's one reason that I'll hold on to that. There's a lot of great things that you get on a Blu-ray that you just don't get on a streaming service, and you sure as fuck don't get downloading it, torrenting it, right? But with the book, that's pretty much not the case. Yes, there is the activation of the senses, like I talked about, a few minutes ago, that you don't get with an ebook. You can't get it with an ebook. It's just not possible. But you are absolutely not missing anything as far as what the story is telling you in an ebook. You're not. So ebooks are a lot more palatable to me than streaming services for movies or even pirate, torrent copies of movies. Because with streaming services and torrenting, a lot of times I'm missing something. And I still torrent plenty, don't confuse me. But a lot of times you're missing something. As to where with an ebook, as compared to a book, yes, there's the physical aspects of it. But as far as content, you're generally not missing anything. And if it is a book that where it does have stuff that's not in the ebook format of it, because there's books where I've bought physical copies of it because there is no ebook version that has everything that's in the physical copy. Yes, I'll buy the physical copy. Of course, then I'll also ship it off to get scanned into an ebook, but I will buy the physical copy at that point. So you get what's important to me. To explain the question, the answer is very simple. I just want all of the content possible, as far as what's available for what I'm purchasing or what I'm interested in. If it's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and they don't have the one done by the U.S. Naval Academy that's unabridged and restored, then fine, I'll get the physical copy of it and then I'll get that scanned and turn it into an ebook. But it's the same thing with Blu-rays. If the Blu-ray doesn't have the commentary track with riff tracks or something, then guess what? I'll go get the torrented copy because then the Blu-ray is missing something, right? So it's all about having the maximum amount of content and material that you can have for whatever the story is that you're going for, or be it the novel, the movie, the TV show, whatever. Okay, I can buy Beavis and Butthead right on DVD, but it's missing all the music videos, and they changed a bunch of shit. So what do? Well, I go and I torrent copies that are VHS rips of the original versions of those episodes, and then I turn those into DVDs. Right? So again, that's what it's all about. It's having the maximum amount of, whatever's out there about it, I want. And whatever format that happens to come in, that's how I'll get it. The other aspect with ebooks, of course, too, is just that, like, all the books that I want to own, that I reference on a regular basis, I would need a mansion alone to hold all of those books. That's just how it is. Like, and that's completely impractical. So as to where instead I can have the Library of Alexandria basically on my Kindle Oasis. That is a matter of practicality. So so there you go. And Blu-rays, understand how do I pack Blu-rays? Like, wow, but don't you need a ton of shelves for your Blu-rays? I have binders. 400 disc binders, because I don't care about the cases. The cases don't mean shit to me, for Blu-rays. And I just toss them all into a binder, and I have the disc, and I'm a happy boy. So anyway, okay, very quickly, leave you off with an album of the week. One last thing for you to go home with. It is a re-release, so I don't have to spend a ton of time talking about it, but it's the 10th anniversary edition, which I cannot believe it has been 10 years, but the 10th anniversary edition of Halestorm's first commercial album, that being the self-titled Halestorm. Now, they did have a little bit of an album before that, kinda, and some of the tracks from that are actually in this 10th anniversary edition, but this is a gorgeous box set. And a lot of, music's the same thing. Like, if I had to have all the CDs that I want and that I listen to, I'd need a mansion. So, so yay for MP3s as well, and I'm not really missing anything, right? In fact, with MP3, with albums, I can add in more tracks that maybe I have, and make like super deluxe editions of albums, right? I love doing that. I do that all the time. My music collection is, I'd put it up against anybody, including iTunes and Tidal. But anyway, the 10th anniversary of Halestorm, they remastered the initial tracks from that album, which, boy, sometimes I think that that's still my favorite album by them. And I love Halestorm. I've seen them 3 times now. In fact, I saw them in 2009 when they were in Syracuse in New York. They were fucking tremendous back then. I thought they were awesome. And I love this album. Familiar Taste of Poison, It's Not You, I Get Off. I Get Off's probably, I can easily say that's my favorite song by them, because, that's just like, that was their first hit. And it's still like, I think their raunchiest, even though, Freak Like Me and other stuff is phenomenal, But, yeah, there's a lot to love here. A lot of new songs I've never heard before that are included later on in this album, in this collection. So I totally recommend picking this up if you haven't. But Halestorm 10th Anniversary Edition. Halestorm's one of the last great bands that we have, and magical that it's led by a front woman, which I think is even better. And Lizzie's just, she's great. Isn't she? She's one of those joys to follow. Social media is bullshit, but she is one of those joys to follow on social media, because she is a piece of work, that one. And anyway, so yeah, check it out. If you maybe haven't revisited that album in a while, there's dynamite songs on there from 2009, and they still sound really fresh. So check it out, Halestorm 10th Anniversary Edition. We will wrap up this Q&A, and I will see all of you on the other side.